Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Westervelt, and welcome to Chemical Week's latest webinar. Today, we have a very timely and important discussion on the role operations will play in accelerating environmental, social, and governance performance and implementation. We all know ESG issues have become increasingly urgent in recent years as industry works toward a net zero carbon future, reduces waste, and continues to improve its sustainability performance. And we have two great and expert speakers here to share some insight. John Sampson is Senior Vice President for Operations, Manufacturing, and Engineering at Dow. John joined Dow more than 35 years ago and has held senior operations, manufacturing, and commercials role across Dow and Olin over his career. And in his current role, John is responsible for Dow's global operations, consisting of more than 22,000 employees, which is more than 60% of Dow's workforce. And we also have Chuck Deese, who is Senior Vice President, Chemical and Process Industries for Argo Consulting. Chuck has worked in the chemical process industry for more than 35 years. He's led the Argo chemical and process industry practice for more than 5 years and was formerly an Argo board member. And before we start, a quick overview of the format for the next hour. Each of our speakers will open with some brief thoughts on the role of operations in driving ESG performance. Then we'll turn to a roundtable discussion, and we'll also have some time for audience Q&A. So do use the Q&A box in your console, and we'll get to as many questions as I can. And with that, I will turn it over to John. John.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Yeah, this week is a really exciting week for us, and really thrilled to be here today talking about ESG. It's really topical for us. Tomorrow, actually, Dow will be celebrating 125 years as a company. For 125 years, Dow has been pushing the boundaries in products and technology, innovating across generations to solve big world challenges, and driven as a collective organization by one simple question, and that is, what's next? We know the world is constantly changing, and the case for change from where we are today and where we're going as an industry is changing rapidly. We know we must outpace that change to not only be competitive, but to be best in class. And we are moving forward with clear direction and intention at Dow. We have committed ourselves to being flexible, adaptable, and resilient in our approach. And we believe that we can navigate any change ahead, overcome any obstacle, and succeed in this industry. Our path at Dow is mapped out through our vision and strategy, which includes enhanced skills, new digital capabilities, and innovation mindset, and a powerful and inclusive culture focused on accelerating efforts to create a more sustainable and equitable future. Operations is really leading the way with several actions directly aligned to our ESG priorities and addressing climate change and plastic waste. Our operations team is the linchpin to Dow's ability to meet these targets, which include protecting the climate, stopping the waste, and closing the loop. And let me unpack those just real quickly. By 2030, Dow will reduce its net annual carbon emissions by 5 million metric tons versus its 2020 baseline. That's a 15% reduction. By 2050, Dow intends to be carbon neutral in scopes 1, 2, and 3, plus product benefits. Stopping the waste is really all about Dow enabling 1 million metric tons of plastics to be collected, reused, or recycled through its direct actions and partnerships by 2030. And in the closed loop space, by 2035, Dow will close the loop by enabling 100% of Dow products sold into packaging applications to be reused, reusable, or recyclable. And in the Dow Path to Zero space, our carbon emissions is another example of a commitment towards ESG. Widespread support for decarbonization emissions is driving demand across the value chain, and Dow is well placed to continue to lead and benefit from this evolution. In the past 15 years, Dow has reduced our overall emissions by 15% through a period of significant business growth, and today we have the most efficient assets in the industry. One proof point is our Texas 9 cracker in Freeport, Texas, which is the lowest carbon intensity has the lowest carbon intensity in our fleet, producing 60% less CO2 per ton of production than the average across our fleet. It also happens to be our largest, most capital and operationally efficient cracker in our fleet. This asset is an industry-leading example of how we can profitably grow while continuing to improve our sustainable footprint. This will include Dow's recent announcement to build the world's first ever zero carbon emissions cracker complex at Dow's Fort Saskatchewan site in Alberta, Canada. In addition, we remain focused on development of phase site emission reduction plans, replacing or upgrading end-of-life and high carbon intensity assets with more efficient and lower conversion cost solutions, and continued integration of cost-efficient clean energy. So ESG is integrated into our business and operations, but it's not a siloed effort. It really is integral to what we're doing each and every day. Our 2020 ESG report, which I welcome you to access and review, builds on our annual sustainability report, which we published for 18 years, and our annual inclusion and diversity report, which we have published since 2018. Dow's commitment to safety and world-leading operations performance is key to our company's success and our license to operate. It communicates in communities around the world. Our performance in operations is measured and tracked against targets in 4 indices of the company's world-leading operations sustainability goal. They include unplanned events, environmental stewardship, total worker health, and transportation stewardship. And we report annually on our world-leading operations performance and employee health and safety data in our ESG report. We remain committed to ESG principles and reporting and transparency to support the move towards global consistent disclosure standards. Additionally, to ensure accountability internally, we've embedded ESG metrics into the scorecard for our annual bonus program. And so from my perspective, it makes a world of difference that we take a holistic approach to our ESG principles and focus. That's the only way we'll drive an all-in culture, the kind of culture necessary to further improve our performance company-wide. So I want to thank you, Rob, and thank Chemical Week again for inviting me to this important discussion. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Great. Thanks, John. Now, Chuck, give us your view on how operations strategy and excellence can drive ESG performance.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Rob. So I want to share a couple of slides with the group here, just to sort of give a perspective. We did a survey with Chemical Week late last year, surveyed over 100 industry executives, and what we were interested in was the linkage between climate targets that companies have set in the chemical industry and how that cascades down or is aligned with their operations strategy. Is there an actionable plan in operations to improve reduce carbon intensity, right, and improve the climate? And I think the results are interesting. I think big picture is that 60% of the companies said we're not quite there. We don't have a strategy, or we're not quite there yet, right? So I think that the leaders clearly have a strategy, as John said, and are very well aligned. But I think overall, the big takeaway is this is still a work in process to link operations to the overall corporate climate target initiatives. 40% of the companies had a good plan, and we were excited to see that, right? So I think the point is that this is a work in process, and there's opportunity. The best thinking companies out there today really have thought through, and kind of the guiding theme here is how to do more with less, right? Run a smart business, do more with less, right? As John said, highly optimized an asset footprint. Their supply chain network is optimized. They have a good asset performance management system, great work processes, and I would say, and they really looked hard at logistics, right? Optimizing rail, ocean, trucking, those transportation modes. So I think that, when you look at energy intensity and emissions, kind of those, they're the levers that where there's some opportunity to improve. And hey, the big takeaway is some companies have well thought that through and have a good program. Others are still working their way through it. So, we thought a little bit about ESG in operations, right? And our line of thought was aligning ESG with a good operational excellence strategy. Hey, at the end of the day, you want to release more capacity, you want to drive growth, right? And you want to expand your margin. And if you're running your business wisely with a good operational excellence framework, a good program, good execution strategies, good mindsets and behaviors, you're going to be driving capacity release and margin expansion. And as a result, you're going to be improving your ESG performance. So, this is an example of a good, I think a good framework that we've used and we've seen in the industry where companies actually are developing initiatives and programs around each of the ladders on this framework, right? Very clear targets, very clear initiatives, actions, owners, and execution plans to not only improve their business, but to reduce carbon. One comment I'd make is, interesting, we did a study with Chemical Week a couple years ago, and it was around operational excellence, and it was, kind of given aging workforce and attrition and M&A, kind of where companies were around OpEx, right? And I think the results seem to parallel this survey here. 60% of the companies saw OpEx as a work in process. 40%, had a well-tuned strategy, right? So I think the point is that, from an executive leadership standpoint, this is an area that should be examined. This is an area that should be thought through, an area that should be in place. You're driving the right mindsets and cultures. It's key to improve your business as well as your carbon footprint. So, the big takeaway from that was, for the audience that are running chemical operations and adjacent operations in process industries, kind of where to look, right? So at the end of the day, there's sort of 5 high impact areas that we think would drive value. And this should fit into an overall operational excellence strategy, right, to reduce your carbon footprint. First thing is, certainly be smart about your plants, right? Optimize your plant footprint. Look at logistics, look at customers, look at talent. But at the end of the day, there's been a lot of M&A in the industry, right? And we find that as companies sort of step back and look at their plant footprint, there are opportunities, in fact, to reduce your footprint. If you reduce your footprint, you're going to reduce your energy, your emissions, as a company, right? So I think that's a key area. Second is asset utilization. Goal would be to, certainly improve availability, overall asset availability, run at your maximum demonstrated rates. But, from I think our travels and discussions with executives in the industry, this continues to be an area of opportunity, right? So the assets that you do have, you want to make sure that you're running at nameplate or beyond nameplate, right? So through debottlenecking initiatives, improve reliability programs, a good operational discipline, the way you run your plants, right? So I think that's key. Third area would be, and some of this ties back to the OpEx approach, right? It's best practice work processes, right, to drive effectiveness, efficiency, and productivity. And we recommend that you start with maintenance and reliability. Big area today in the chemical process industry. I would say a lot of companies are beginning, many companies have, but I would say that there's a lot of work currently going on or planned in the reliability area that's going to drive higher asset utilization, right? Key focus area. Fourth would be around capital effectiveness, right? I would say low carbon technologies are, as John talked about, are being utilized. And I think this is an area that companies should look at, as well as delivering projects on schedule, on budget, right? So we can get that carbon reduction as planned. And then the last area, I think, is logistics, as we mentioned. Hey, this is just good business, but I think this is a huge area in terms of energy optimization and waste optimization, right? That'll improve your bottom line, but also reduce your carbon footprint. So our thought here is you really want to start with an analysis You want to drive a baseline. You want to look at quick hits. You want to develop a roadmap with short-term, long-term improvement plans and targets, and really get and the outcome of that should be that an analysis should net an actionable plan with a business case and a roadmap that you're relentlessly driving to improve your business and reduce your carbon footprint over time. So. There's some thinking there. Hope that helps, group. We wanted to share that. Rob, I think back to you at this point for panel discussion.
Excellent. Yeah, well, thank you, John. Thank you, Chuck, for setting the stage here. And like I said, we will have time for Q&A, so do use the Q&A box in the console. And I'll start with a few questions. And obviously, it's a thread that ran through both of your comments there, particularly around the urgency around ESG issues and decarbonization. If anything, even through the pandemic, despite the challenges that presented to operations, ESG has intensified over the last 2 years. And how is that changing manufacturing and operational excellence strategies? And John, I'll start with you for that one. I know you mentioned the performance metrics and comp are being embedded, but how is ESG changing your role and how you and your team carry out Dow's operations strategy?
Sure, thanks. And by the way, Chuck's outline was spot on. If I think about the footprint, asset utilization, work process, capital efficiency, and logistics, we're all over all those items, and so we completely agree with his outline there. But in the space of how ESG and decarbonization is really changing the work that we do, we really have lined all this up again through our world-leading operations, which is a key element of our 2025 sustainability goals. We've taken a lot of actions to support ESG and decarbonization. So we've incorporated decarbonization and ESG directly into our capital prioritization processes, as Chuck said earlier. So there's a screen, if you will, when we bring capital forward for approval. We run a capital approval committee, and we're looking for the ESG screen to be filled out by anyone who's bringing capital forward, so we can understand the impact that the particular capital project will have on carbon, on our site and business footprint, and our assets. We're also working on a cultural change that's really needed across our organization and our site to become more adaptable, flexible, and resilient in light of the climate change challenges, to ensure reliability for our customers and that our customers can have the products they want when they need them, because, again, we thought about what might happen, have anticipated what could happen, and then have kept our assets running in a very reliable manner. We're also making short and longer term adjustments to our organizational design and resourcing to support additional needs in this space, i.e. ESG reporting and expertise in decarbonization technologies, which are somewhat new to us. And so we're adding new players, if you will, on the field to make sure that we can cover all the new activities that are needed. Those would just be a few, I'd say, Rob.
Great. And Chuck, as you look across the industry, you mentioned some of the high-level findings from the survey there, but what have you noticed around the urgency around ESG and decarbonization, and how is that changing how industry approaches these issues?
Yeah, I think to John's point, ESG has become sort of a catalyst for really working down through the operations and driving improvement initiatives to reduce emissions or your carbon footprint, right? So I do think that ESG has accelerated that the ESG program has accelerated in climate change the sense of urgency. I would say, though, that I think in general what we find out there, the leaders clearly, Dow, BASF, folks like that, have good, strong programs and initiatives in place that are well aligned, right? But I think in general in the industry, I think the industry understands there's opportunity to drive drive ESG strategies down from the board level, down through operations, into an operational excellence program, right? And I think a big piece of that would be around accountabilities. You know, it's a catalyst. I think in general, I think there are targets, but I think there's work to be done in terms of getting a good OpEx strategy in place that's reducing carbon, reducing water, improving overall ESG performance in the industry.
Okay. You know, operational efficiency and optimization have always brought, you know, welcome sustainability benefits. And, you know, what steps can be taken to convey this in the language of ESG and decarbonization commitments? And John, you mentioned some of the metrics there that are being developed, but you know, how are you aligning operational efficiency and optimization with Dow's ESG targets and decarbonization targets? I know you've touched on that in both of your comments, but if you could drill down a little more there on what Dow is doing.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I'd be glad to, Rob. Yeah, so, you know, we're taking steps right now to really help people see the connection between raw material efficiency, water conservation, and energy efficiency through what we call a sustainability most effective technology playbook. This is really being developed in partnership between our Energy Technology Center and our Innovation Technology team. This playbook will be released later this year, and as you know, because we operate at 103 sites in 31 countries, leveraging good ideas is a really important process for us to make sure that folks don't have to go and reinvent things. And so we think as we develop this sustainability MET playbook and we leverage that out, we'll make sure that everyone's on the same level of understanding in terms of best practices and how we want folks to think about and approach the ESG and sustainability area. The playbook will share in a streamlined approach how we can utilize these efforts to make an impact today towards our ESG and decarbonization commitments, as well as provide an easy to understand information on how to optimize by unit operation, by asset, along with new technologies that are proven to consider for further optimization. In addition, we're taking a site-by-site approach to evaluate energy efficiency opportunities directly related to carbon reduction and ESG. This intentional dialogue between experts and our operations personnel and facilities also helps to draw connections and build sustainability skill sets at the frontline level.
Correct. Thanks, John. And Chuck, any thoughts there about how you see companies aligning operational excellence with ESG and decarbonization commitments?
I mean, I would say that Dow is the model, right? You know, in terms of where Dow is heading, and I think that, as I mentioned, I think in general, I think this is an area of opportunity to drive that linkage from, you know, the boardroom down to the shop floor, to use an old adage, right? So I think that I think what you want is you want a good board strategy in terms of you know, carbon targets and climate change, and you want that cascaded down through you know, your operations leadership out to your sites, right? Where each site has a program linked to you know, their OpEx strategy, where they're reducing carbon and water and waste in general. And you want a good monitoring system and sort of a fact-based decision-making system that's aligned up and down the organization, right, with performance targets. So, you know, I think getting the basic fundamental program in place, the strategies down to the operations, the shop floor, but then make sure you have the right performance management reporting that's cascading up and down the organization. So you're actually, you know, achieving those targets, I think, is key, and you know, an opportunity in the chemical process industry.
Okay. Now, Chuck, you outlined the 5 priority areas, but as you look at what companies, the steps they should be taking now. What do you think are the key priorities? What should they be focused on initially? And what will take longer to implement as you think about the implementation here?
I'd say, Rob, it kind of gets back to, kind of where we started. It's the top priority, I think, should be, leadership should ensure that there's a good operational excellence framework in place, a good strategy. It has the right initiatives. It has the right targets. The organization has the right behaviors and mindset. There's a relentless execution strategy. So, I think the first part of that is, and I think this is a gap in a lot of companies, in the industry. The leaders clearly have it, right? But I think in general, this is a gap. So I would say, one, if I were a CEO, I would inspect my organization to make sure I had a good, strong operational excellence strategy that's tied to carbon and waste water reduction, right? That's one. And then two, I think from a priority standpoint, I think kind of the two focus areas would be overall asset utilization, driving rate, driving availability. I think that the better your assets are utilized, the more efficient your operations are, and at the end of the day, you're going to generate less waste, be it energy, water. I think that's key. I think the second area is probably logistics, right? When you really think about rail and when you really think about trucking, huge area of opportunity, I would say, to optimize logistics. And some companies have taken steps and have active programs to do that. Kind of given the constraints in the industry today with rail and trucking, and also ocean. I mean, I think it's pretty huge. But I think that's the second area of opportunity where from a focus area in reducing carbon, across the value chain, there's also opportunity.
And John, a related question there. How has Dow prioritized setting its own metrics, and what are the early steps that Dow has taken to set and achieve its ESG targets? How have you prioritized there?
Sure. Yeah, look, our success in meeting these aggressive decarbonization targets will require three key areas of strategic focus in regards to monitoring and reporting internally and externally. One, use of most effective standardized tools and applications globally within each of our production facilities to monitor, track, and reliably report. So as technologies and standards develop and improve over time, we'll need to keep our assets current. Secondly, successfully integrating product and process metrics in alignment with governmental and industry requirements across the product digital thread from production through distribution to enable our vision of carbon neutrality as we use energy, utilities, and raw materials to manufacture and ship our products. And then third, it's really just data management. It's already been mentioned. Access to a complete and digital portfolio of end-to-end product traceability information will be key if we're going to have success in here long term.
Great. And I guess, John, we'll stay with you here. You mentioned Dow's decarbonizing growth strategy, and as you carry this out, how are you linking it to Dow's own growth and value creation strategy? How does Dow continue to grow throughout this process profitably?
Yeah, look, that's the whole tagline here, Rob. It's all about decarbonize and grow. We know we can do both simultaneously. We've got a detailed roadmap to our 2050 carbon neutral target, and really touches every aspect of our business and focuses on really 5 key areas. It's about optimizing our facilities and processes. And there we're investing $1 billion a year in our infrastructure, including replacing end-of-life, high carbon intensity assets with more carbon efficient technologies at our top sites globally, and investing in carbon abatement technologies such as circular hydrogen and carbon capture and storage. We recently announced the plans, as I said earlier, for our first net zero carbon emissions integrated ethylene cracker and derivatives complex at Fort Saskatchewan, which will triple the site's capacity while retrofitting existing assets so that they are net zero, at a tripling of output and a zeroing out of the carbon that's emitted. Secondly, I'd say we're increasing clean energy in our purchased power mix. In 2021, we expanded access to renewable power, including hydropower, wind, and solar, to more than 850 megawatts. That means that more than 25% of our purchased electricity now comes from renewable sources and places us amongst the top 20 global corporations for clean energy purchases. Third, I'd say developing low carbon products and technologies and services. We're helping our customers here have success with their climate goals by providing products that facilitate energy efficiency, lightweighting, fuel transition, circularity, and increasing their operational efficiency. And therefore, they can, as Chuck said earlier, use less resources and reduce their emissions. Fourth, I'd say collaborating with our supply chain to tackle the upstream emissions part of this, call it Scope 3. We're working closely with our suppliers to set emission reduction targets and to embed ESG performance as a metric in supplier selection, contracting, and relationship management. That's a really big one. It's quite complex, obviously, with the number of suppliers that we have, but we have a great team that's focused on getting that work done. And lastly, I'd say investing in transformative next-generation solutions. So we're investing in longer-term innovations in manufacturing technologies such as fluidized catalytic dehydrogenation, ethane dehydrogenation, and we're looking at electric cracking technology as a way to improve our steam crackers with e-cracking, which will help us transition to a cleaner manufacturing facility by 2050. So I think all of those areas of focus and strategic efforts will help us both reach the decarbonization goals that we have and continue to grow our product lines.
Chuck, any thoughts there about how these efforts can be linked to profitable growth? Is it, I mean, obviously they do seem complementary, but how do companies carry that out?
I mean, I think John hit the nail on the head in terms of the strategies. I think the big issue today in the industry, that we see is capacity release, right? So, driving more volume. So, and it gets back to, how do you do that, right? So understanding your asset utilization, understanding your OEE, understanding your levers to optimize those assets through best practice work processes and tools, technology, to improve asset utilization. That will, if you're running your assets effectively, that will drive growth. Also, if you're smart about back to kind of footprint and you're optimizing your assets, you're optimizing your footprint, the assets you do have, you're getting maximum utilization from through, as we talked about, reliability, debottlenecking initiatives. That's going to drive more volume. That's going to drive more profit. And at the end of the day, you're going to optimize your energy intensity, use less water, and that's going to improve the top line. I think on the bottom line, I think some of the strategies around transportation. I think there's opportunity to improve productivity there. I think there's opportunity in the work processes. In terms of capital deployment, Dow has a lot of great initiatives underway, best practices around new innovative technologies. But I think it's just getting the best and brightest minds together in your organization to, with the right, with sort of the right thinking and thought process that can think through innovative technologies in your manufacturing process, in your supply chain and manufacturing process, to improve business operations. So I think it's Rob, I think it's it's sort of a combination of those three areas. But clearly, if you're driving best practices in all areas and engaging the organization, that's not only going to improve growth and top and bottom line, but it's also going to reduce your carbon footprint.
Okay. And back to John. How do you achieve these ESG goals while maintaining the continuous improvement in overall operational efficiency and not continuing the improvement for overall health, safety, and environmental performance? Like the earlier question, these seem complementary, but how do you do this without distracting or losing sight of your broader operational excellence goals? John, how are you doing that at Dow?
Yeah, look, that's a big question for us, and we ask that quite often to make sure that we're not diverging at by any stretch of imagination. I mean, let's be clear, this is not an either-or decision for us. Yep. Our objective of being first class in the way we decarbonize our operations is by no means in conflict or in competition with the objectives of being first class in EH&S. They are absolutely joined at the hip. Experiences from the past are teaching us that the effort which we are putting on increasing reliability are also paying dividends when it comes to our EH&S performance. I think Chuck said this earlier. Plants that run reliably, that run efficiently, generally have pretty darn good EH&S performance. And so we're putting a full court press on increasing our reliability because we know that's the easiest and cheapest way to get more product out, to make our customers happy. But we're also increasing the inherent safety of our operations because a reliable plant is also usually a safe plant. Same holds true when it comes to sustainability and the efforts that we're taking to decarbonize our operations. In doing this, we will address known reliability and environmental issues. And guess what? We'll also use that as an opportunity to accelerate the implementation of digitizing our operation, which in turn will also improve our reliability and our EH&S performance. So it's a bit circular, if you will. They're all working together towards the same objective. In simple terms, if you give engineers at Dow a problem to solve, they'll look broadly and look for options to take out many different defects with one stone rather than just take a surgical approach. Continuous improvement and innovation are really part of our DNA for the last 125 years since H.H. Dow founded this company. And, he was inspired and challenged his team by the following well-known quote: "If you can't do it better, why do it?" And so we are 100% bought into that, and we're all about doing it better each and every day. We're all about the power of and, about the reliable plan and one that drives operational efficiency. All of these work collectively together to deliver that ESG result that you're looking for. 50% of our employees are involved in some sort of volunteerism if you get to the S part of this. And so our employees are involved inside and outside the fence line to really make sure we're delivering the best we can each and every day. But the reliability component inside the fence line is really a key focus for us, and we are putting the resources towards that to improve that each and every day.
And Chuck, any thoughts there about, as John said, ensuring that these are sort of attached to the hip here, that you don't lose your continuous improvement in EH&S as you're focusing on ESG?
Yeah, I think it's back to monitoring and processes to make sure there's alignment, that you're meeting targets, and you're reducing your carbon footprint while running safe operations, right? And I really like what John said about reliability, right? I think when we, as we work with many chemical process companies out there, maintenance and reliability is a key focus, right? Everyone, or I would say most, have understand the impact and the importance of a good reliability effectiveness program, a good maintenance efficiency program, and that's where they're placing bets to, as John said, one, improve safety, but two, improve asset utilization, right? So I think that's, I think that's that seems to be the big area of focus today, and I think that's the area over the years, I think, where the industry's lost some steam. I think when, back in the day when OpEx programs were strong, I mean, we've had aging workforce, attrition, M&A. A lot of companies have lost talent, right? And I think as a result, some of these work process areas, reliability, maintenance being one, have suffered. And I think that's clearly a big focus area that will improve safely improve operations.
Okay. Chuck, any thought about the tools and the metrics, or even KPIs, the key performance indicators that are needed as these targets and goals around ESG become more aggressive? Is there a need for a rethink there?
I tell you what, one company's doing that we're working with that I think is probably, one of the best practices. They've actually built out a command center. It's a visual war room, and the war room it's at the corporate level, but it ties to all their plants. And in that war room is their sort of operational excellence strategy for improving top line growth, driving more capacity release, driving more growth, as well as productivity initiatives within the organization, right? So I think technology is great, and I think there's some good technology in the marketplace, but some of this gets to basic war room setups, command centers that are visual, that have metrics, charts, actionable items on the wall, where people get together. I think the idea of having a common set of KPIs, metrics, that the organization gets aligned on, that's tied to this war room, a good management cadence that flows from the war room. I think visualization is key in the war room and out in the operations. But I'd say one of the I think through our travels, one of the interesting companies we're working with actually has a corporate war room, and it's driving, and it's the visualization. It's where the team comes together to drive OpEx. They track it. They have metrics, as well as carbon reduction, right? Metrics on energy, metrics on emissions, metrics on water, and up and down reporting. But it's tick and tide, right? And it works, and it's probably the most effective operation I've seen in terms of really getting results.
Okay. And John, you mentioned Dow's efforts in digital, and what role, if you could drill down a little more on the role that you see digital playing in manufacturing and operations to drive ESG and decarbonization improvement. How important is that tool going to be as you carry out strategies here?
Sure. Yeah, digital won't be the solution for decarbonization, but it certainly will be an important enabler for the technology advancements that will lead to solving this challenge. So in Dow, we are committed to end-to-end digitization across manufacturing and operations, which will assure a robust and secure architecture platform is in place to enable us to use top-of-the-line IT tools, automated data recording, data visualization, as Chuck said earlier, and compliance reporting as we monitor and improve ESG performance across our product mix. Digitization at Dow is already driving significant ESG and decarbonization improvements, and it really holds a massive future potential as we deploy and use digital technologies in new ways to achieve our goals. We will leverage digital technology throughout operations and drive both ESG and decarbonization, including many efforts across the company that empower Dow people with enabling technology to change the way they think and work each and every day. A couple of quick examples. In Freeport, Texas, we've implemented our digital manufacturing program. In 2021, we installed an LTE wireless network covering more than 4,000 acres. We integrated 12 enterprise data sources. So these were, systems that an operator might have had to go to 12 different sources to get information, whether it be a procedure, a red tag, whatever. And we've integrated all those and brought them together through this digitization effort so that an operator in the field with a tablet can access any of those 12 systems with the tablet. We've configured over 200 mobile devices to work in the field and converted nearly 300 procedures into a digital format. And so it really allows that operator who's in the field to make game day decisions, so to speak, right there at the point of contact. They can get all the information they need through that tablet and make a good decision without having to run back and forth to the control room and to different systems and all that. It's just going to make the job less stressful. It's going to make it more efficient. And again, it'll help them make better decisions as the work is getting done. So we see the program delivering benefits in many ways. Again, back to that our big R word, reliability, right? If we're making better decisions, we're going to have a more reliable asset. If we're making better decisions, our assets will run at lower cost. If we're making better decisions, we'll use less raw materials more than likely to make what we have to make. And so all this will feed into lower carbon as we run our assets better each and every day.
Great. And John, I'll keep you on the hot seat here. How is operations? How are you aligning across other functions at Dow, from raw material sourcing, R&D, commercial development, planning, broader supply chain, to drive the ESG improvement, and also to address the Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions that you mentioned earlier? How are you collaborating across the different functions at Dow there to drive this?
Sure. Yeah. So we've assembled a cross-business, cross-functional program management office to design and deliver the strategy we need and drive prioritization of projects to help decarbonize Dow's businesses while identifying opportunities to create value for our customers. So the team is led by a steering team of executives from across the company that touch every aspect of what we're doing. Within that team, there are 4 main tracks that we work on. First track, of course, inside the fence line, Scope 1 and 2 emissions. We've got about 35 million tons that we need to abate across all of our assets around the world. And this team, of course, is looking at emissions from our operations directly within our control, as well as the Scope 2 piece, which is attributed to the emissions from usage of electricity and steam that we purchase from third parties. So Scope 1 and 2, that's Team 1. There's a Scope 3 team, which is charged with finding opportunities to reduce emissions from our Scope 3 emissions, which are upstream emissions, of course, from raw materials coming in and from our products going out to customers. So we've got a team focused just on the Scope 3 side of things, working with suppliers, working with our service providers that are taking our products to our customers, and understanding from a transportation perspective what we can do to drive those numbers down, working in a collaborative effort. Then we've got a team working on product benefits, right? So as I said earlier, many of our products provide great benefit to our customers in terms of reducing their carbon footprint. And this team is really tasked with identifying opportunities to drive value from both our current portfolio of low emission products, as well as helping us design what's needed for the future. What sort of new products should we be coming forward with to help our customers have more success in producing low carbon results. Then our 4th team is our new ventures team. And there we're really out there on the leading edge, really asking that team to identify next generation technologies which we can research, develop, and collaborate on to advance our work. And I mentioned some of those earlier in e-cracking and some of the other things that we're doing to look at new opportunities to bring the next generation of technologies. The good news is in all this, we know we have technology today that works that we can install today to get our carbon down. And that's what we're going to do in generation 1 of this. But as we think out in the future, we know that there will be innovation as everyone engages in this space, and we want to be out there on the leading edge there and making sure we're taking advantage of those technologies.
Great. And there's actually a question in the queue about engaging suppliers here. How is Dow engaging its suppliers when it comes to Scope 3 emissions?
Yeah, absolutely. That's that Scope 3 team that I spoke about of the 4 main tracks. And so they are actively working with, they've got the list of all of our suppliers and service providers. They've done some basic math on where the emissions are coming from. And so they're going down the Pareto list and kind of engaging and working with those suppliers and service providers to say, hey, what can we do together? What are your plans? And so what can we count you in for in terms of carbon reduction going forward? Absolutely. Great.
And, Chuck, you mentioned the survey earlier. I think one of the findings was that less than 30% of respondents had a clear ESG strategy in place. How do you define an ESG strategy for the companies that are starting to just develop this, and why is it important to have one in this environment?
Yeah, I think it starts with sort of the theme of this whole discussion, Rob. It starts with a good, a good operational excellence framework, right? So the whole concept is run a smart business, do more with less, right? So if your company is focused on OpEx, footprint, supply chain optimization, asset utilization, reliability initiatives are tied to that, capital effectiveness, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think if you're running a smart business and you have a good OpEx strategy, as we kind of tried to show on an earlier slide, environmental, social, and governance cascade from those, right? So there are targets and that cascade from those to reduce energy emissions, water, et cetera. So I would recommend revisiting your operational excellence strategy. Make sure that it's holistic. You have a good framework. You have a good owners, accountabilities, good execution strategies for each of those initiatives, a good monitoring program, targets that are driving results, right? So I think you could that OpEx strategy should drive productivity, growth, and ESG reduction targets, right? And that ought to be, sort of the centerpiece of the organization in terms of what good looks like in terms of the way a business should operate, right? So, and there are companies that are driving that strategy, and then I'd mentioned, one company in Europe we're working with is using, and John talked about it, PMO, War Room, right, where the executive steering team, it's cascading down. Everyone is involved in that OpEx ESG reduction initiative to drive results. So, that's where I would recommend a company start. If I were an executive, I'd work with my leadership team to make sure that's solid, that's in place, and make sure that I'm driving the accountabilities on a frequent basis to make sure that the organization's getting results.
Great, thanks. And again, please do get your questions in. We have time for some audience questions, and I'll just run through a few of them here. Question for John here about saying it's great to hear the carbon emissions impacts have been added to your capital projects evaluation process, ensuring that they're weighted against other key drivers before approval. But the core of the question here is, how do you gauge or prioritize standalone decarbonization projects when they don't meet your standard hurdle rates? How do you prioritize projects in that case?
Yeah, look, I think that when it comes to decarbonization, we have a clear path to get to our 2050 objectives. The speed with which we get there will be a collaborative effort with governments and local and local governments and countries, as the speed with which we're moving in Canada has been shaped by the fact that the Canadian government has incentivized us to move faster. And so that's very helpful when we can work in a collaborative way, and they're providing infrastructure to support what we want to do in terms of decarbonizing in Canada. And that's why we're super excited about that project. They've got a trunk line outside of our fence line there in Fort Saskatchewan where we can put the liquefied CO2, right? So that infrastructure is already in place. So we can move forward with confidence knowing that that part of the process is already kind of taken care of. So when projects don't have, say they don't meet our hurdle rate, but the fact is, on an ongoing basis, we are constantly replacing assets, right, that have reached end of life. And so having a good technology plan that says when it's time to replace that turbine, when it's the time to replace that cracker, here's the most effective technology. And the fact is, right, our Texas 9 is the benchmark for us. It's 60% lower than the average across our fleet. So we're starting to replace with a newer, better, more efficient asset. And then it's just a matter of adding some of the final decarbonization technologies to get the assets down to zero. So, good news, bad news is, we've got projects that are going to come up because we're timed out, and so we've got the technology to know we want to install when that happens.
Great. And for Chuck, in your opening comments, you mentioned that the bottlenecks that companies face. How are companies identifying these bottlenecks and addressing them?
Yeah, I think that at a higher level, I think it's really a strategy or an initiative to look at overall asset utilization, right? Operating asset utilization. And, I would say the best companies are looking at, as part of that asset performance management, asset optimization strategy, are looking at where are my bottlenecks, where are my reliability issues, where am I experiencing human factors, operational issues, right? So they're dissecting that, right? And I think bottlenecks is one of the areas. There are modeling tools, out there. AspenTech and others have some great tools for modeling operations, for looking at how to debottleneck a site. And there's, it's the wizardry of getting, the right process engineering together with the production organization, with the right leadership folks in a room to brainstorm innovative approaches to reduce bottlenecks, right? So there's a lot of inherent knowledge within operations, within, process and production engineering that can be leveraged. We find in a site, just in a group setting, in a facilitated discussion with a brown paper, to look at, where are my bottlenecks? How do I prioritize that? What's my value if I reduce that bottleneck? And then what's the action plan, right? So it's an approach and a process that looks something like that. And I would say good companies have those processes in place. Some companies, they're not as mature, but that's where they're trying to drive to.
Great. A question for John here, and I know it weaved through a lot of your comments, but if you had to identify a single fundamental building block that Dow put in place to put ESG in focus, what was it? I mean, what do you view as the most important parts of the foundation that Dow is building around ESG?
Look, I'll pivot back to what Chuck said earlier. It really is understanding your assets at a technical level and having the data so that you can really analyze your footprint and understand then with the KPI metrics what your asset utilization capabilities are and what you can do to improve them. So it really is just having a fundamental knowledge via our technology centers of the technologies that we're running today, how they perform in that space, and having data that we can then use to shape. That's how we know we got 35 million tons to abate here, is that our tech centers have done a great job of really going out and assessing our assets. So that gave us a bit of a jump start. And then it allowed us to put in the framework of our teams that we have, those 4 teams we have, so that we can go off and attack scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, et cetera. So I think, then all that's tied up then in a work process, but I'd say that would be the fundamental piece.
Okay. And a question on getting to your scope for Dow, getting to your scope 1, 2, 3 emissions targets. Do voluntary emissions reductions or carbon offsets, what role does that play as opposed to operational improvement? I mean, how much of Dow's net zero target is going to be driven by operational improvements and how much is going to be driven by offsets?
Right. Well, we're going to abate the 35 million tons of Scope 1 and 2 for sure. And we're going to go after the Scope 3, as we understand, working with our suppliers. We're not planning to buy our way out of this. We're going to go after actually making those reductions. And of course, we don't have any control over whether it's CBAMs or cap and trade or whatever the governments do in terms of how each region is going to manage that. We will certainly work with them and try to influence them. But no, our intention is to go get the carbon and take care of it.
Okay. Great. And I know we're at the top of the hour, so we'll do one final question. What's around the pressure that you're feeling under the current economic climate? And I guess, obviously, particularly in Europe, this is a challenge. But with, given the challenges in Europe, do you think the uncertainty slows down at all the trend toward carbon neutrality, or does it stay top of mind for companies? I guess John and then Chuck. Yeah.
Sure. Look, our observation is, no one's come out and told us, hey, you can take a pause on this. We're going to pull back on what we said. Now, it hasn't happened yet, and we're not anticipating that it will. So we're pressing on with our plans in Terneuzen and the Netherlands, for instance, to take carbon out of the assets there. So we're expecting to continue on, and we're planning to keep pace so that we can stay out in the front. Oh, by the way, on the product side, as you start to produce zero carbon products, we think that our customers are there and saying to us, we know that they're there and saying to us, hey, we want these products. We want to be able to show, zero carbon on this package or whatever. And so we think there's a demand for these products as well. So we think makes good market sense to go and get these products produced and get them done quickly.
Right. And Chuck, any final thoughts there on how companies can maintain the momentum here?
I think it's aligned with what John said. I think that in the U.S. we see no change. I think in Europe, I would say we see a little change in the Nordics, kind of given some of the dependency on Russian gas, and that's a problem. They're rethinking that strategy, and as a result, ESG may not as be. It's important, but there are other conflicting priorities right now. But I think at the end of the day, if anything, I've seen from the investor community, PE, investment banks, shareholders, a real focus, probably a stronger focus these days around ESG, right? And it's really beginning to sort of drive strategies, from a Chemco corporation in terms of getting good actionable plans in place, right? So I don't think that's going to change, Rob. I think what's going on right now is something short term, and I think ESG is the investment community is going to require it, and I think it's just the way businesses will operate in the future.
Well, great. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Chuck. I know we're past the top of the hour. We could have gone a lot longer on this critical issue. So thank you to both. Thank you all for attending. And do pass this link for the webcast on to a colleague. This will be up on ChemWeek's website later today. And thank you again, and have a great day. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.